have a couple of successful campaigns that you can be kind of more specific about, and either campaigns that kind of surprised you with their success, or where you just really feel like you nailed it?
Oh, okay. Well, I would say as a campaign that didn't a campaign that comes to mind is maybe the way I'd answer that. Is I worked on Jeremy Atherton Lynn's first book, which was called Gay Bar. It was mid-pandemic. I was having, in all honesty, the same kind of crisis that I think we all were globally, mentally, et cetera. It was a difficult, anxious time. And it meant that I was having a harder time reading than I used to, which for my job and person was a bit of made me feel quite worried. And I remember when The Galley for Gay Bar came in, it was the first book that broke that, where I was just able to dive in. I felt the same love. The writer had done such a beautiful job that the ease of reading was complete for me. I was able to dive right in. And I really believed that I thought it was an absolutely brilliant, fun, intellectual, necessary, wonderful work. And so I was really proud. That book went on to win the NBCC award that year, went into several printings, and really was a success. And I was really proud of the effort put in there in a moment that was quite difficult to get other people's attention. Because as I said, everyone that I was emailing was living at home, or their address was changing every few months because it was that pocket of time when no one quite knew what they were doing. It was a debut book. The writer was outside the US, which can be a little bit challenging. But that was one of those moments where I felt like I gave it my all for what I thought the reception could be. And then it was that reception, and it got beautifully, beautifully reviewed, as it absolutely should. He was able to comment on a couple of the pop culture moments at the time. So he had written for the New York Times about the state of gay bars that were closing because of COVID, as well as other moments, in relation to his own book being about queer spaces throughout history and the versions of himself that he brought to those spaces. Um, we did a mailing where we did a pink bar of soap that said gay on it, so a gay bar, to some press and influencers that would be going a little bit above and beyond. It wasn't something that happened for absolutely every campaign, but because I thought of the idea, I thought this was a book that had a list that I could come up with quite uh, naturally for folks who that would be impactful to send it to. And so my assistant and I at the time put sort of together a little bit of an extra package and asked the publisher, could we do that and have the budget to do that? Um, and so collectively, I felt really, in hindsight, proud that we put everything at it, including some things that don't always work. And then Jeremy, it has to be said, I mean, not only was the book great, but he is a writer who every time an opportunity came, he was really capable and adept at being able to make everything in his own voice, but bear in mind the outlet that he was writing for. Because he really did, I was really proud of the range of outlets that he was included in, literary and queer, and as I said, sort of mainstream commenting at large. And he was incredible at being available and really adept at keeping it his own voice, fun, serious, historical, and bearing in mind like what that piece would be sitting next to in the particular outlet that he was in. So certainly, we should say, in case it sounds like I think it's all me, he delivered beautifully from the book and everywhere afterwards. But I was delighted when he won, because he should, and he did.
I mean, when you're starting out in the work of kind of like publicizing an author in a book, do you have just a wish list, or just a basic list? Like, this is where we're going to seek for reviews. This is where we're going to try to get some coverage. This is perhaps an interview or a book club that we're going to, I mean, is there a list that you just kind of basically have? I know it shifts from author to author and subject to subject, but
Yes, I usually start with a fresh one each time. For me personally, that just works better. It means that every single person that I'm pursuing with a very firm understanding why I'm knocking on the door. And I think it makes me more confident in knocking. It's not that I'm like, oh, maybe they'll like this and I hope they do. I sort of try and keep forefront the way in which I think if you just look at this, you'll see why it would be of value to you and your readers. And so I think it is a more forceful or a more self-assured approach, which I think makes a difference. But I absolutely do come up with those lists for myself. And not only is I think strategically really important to have a list of goals and also a bit of like, this is the A goal. And then I also try and have, and if that wouldn't work out, this would be B and C, and maybe there's some kind of a safety. Because at every level, those things are really possible, no matter, what publication or brand awareness you're talking about for that book and writer. Um, so I think that's really helpful to do early when you've just read it, when all the creative juices are flowing. I would definitely recommend doing that in collaboration with the writer, both for their own wishes and ideas, but also you never know who their professor in college was or what for the last publication their relationships are. So you don't want to accidentally miss a great idea or a low-hanging fruit or an available relationship because you haven't sort of taken the time to do that. The other thing that I will say, maybe only of interest if folks are looking to work in publishing and less so from the author's perspective. But I also think it's hugely helpful in the moments mid-campaign when inevitably we all worry, is this gonna, how are we doing? How is it going? Are we hitting the markers? Having set your own list of markers, I always find makes me weather those moments with clarity because I can just look back at my own, well, this is what I was hoping. How are we doing? I know when the X issue closes. Have I heard back from this person? And then if not, I know exactly what I need to do to sort of be on time or on par with um, my own hopes and plan. And I also think it helps because as a publicist, you're getting a lot of feedback from everyone about what they might love to see happen. And I think if you don't have your own plan of what you think you can deliver or would like to deliver, you can be a bit in the wind of like, oh, well, I don't have the Today Show. It's like, but did you think you could get the Today Show? Is this a book that you, in your professional opinion, think is likely to be a Today Show contender, or is this coming from someone else? And it is, you do want to deliver everyone's hopes and dreams, I think, right? We're all team players and cheerleaders. So I'm a big believer in that document as helpful, both strategically for delivering the kind of work you're proud of, but also to remind oneself in those moments of emotion that come up or insecurity from anyone on the team, including yourself, what that realistic and still hopeful and ambitious plan looked like, so you don't get buffeted by those wins too hard. So I'm a big believer in those documents as a really helpful place to start.
It also feels like that part of some strategies that we've seen today to kind of like improve the visibility of a book or clever swag for lack of a better. I mean, when Leslie was here and she was talking about the experience of publishing Splinters, she mentioned sending out tweezers along with copies of the book. And I was just wondering, what are some of the other kind of most clever or just well thought out bits of swag that you can think of that have accompanied other campaigns?
Oh, fun. Yes. And I should give so credit to Leslie because I'm pretty sure that was her idea, but also credit to the marketing teams because most often some of that sort of physical fun asset, then the folks who get it sit in marketing. So I don't want to sort of take more credit for that than would be true. I do think the tweezers for Splinters was one of the better, like it was so unique and made so much sense in a way that doesn't need explanation, but that I wouldn't have immediately thought of. I'm trying to think of other really, I mean, some tropes repeat because they work, right? So I'm not naming things like totes or the boxes because I think poorly of them. And obviously they work, which is why they repeat and people wear them, but they're more common. And so I think for that reason, I'm not necessarily jumping to list them. I will say maybe sticking to PR, some of the things that I've done that I'm quite proud of that feel similar is there have been a lot of events that I've put on that are book events in the broadest terms. So I worked on a book about the French circus and a writer who had run off to sort of join it. And so all of his events had circus performers. And so that meant that I was checking ceiling heights for jugglers and were the steel beams able to support contortionists, et cetera. And I'm delighted because those events were events in the real complete sense of the word. They made so much sense for that book. It was a reason to come out, whether you were a book buyer or not. And it was a community event for folks who got to celebrate their own work on stage and in the audience. Or I worked on Born to Run by Chris McDougall some years ago, which was a bestseller that he wrote beautifully. He's a great writer about barefoot running. And on many of his events, especially once the book took off, we had folks would meet Chris, do a barefoot run through whatever city they were in and at the bookstore, and then he would give his author talk. And sometimes local media would come out because, of course, a bunch of New Yorkers running with no shoes on is kind of like a moment for
Yeah.
cameras, or at least it was then, and the state of the world. And so for PR, I do think if you have the bandwidth and a good idea, I definitely want to say that there's no point in adding something that doesn't make sense or isn't going to be additive just to say you've done it. But in moments where you're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you have the time, if it isn't a huge budget, to at least consider what it would look like to do that. I always find it really worth it, both in terms of what it pays back. And then also this, again, it's in a way, it's that same specificity we were talking about earlier. The more you can make something itself, the more I think visible it stands out to those who are looking for it. And for especially for Born to Run, we ended up doing one of those events right before the New York City Marathon. And we had, I remember on a Friday night, a line around the block. And I remember thinking, again, that was a moment to be proud of. In New York, to create a line for a book is not an everyday occurrence. So I was glad we were able to do that for him.